right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Survivor Space and today's Survivor Circle. I'm Becky Perkins, the Survivor Support Specialist with Zero Abuse Project, and we're very pleased to welcome you here today for what promises to be a wonderful, beautiful, heartfelt, sincere, all the good words conversation. And I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. Very pleased to welcome my friend Melanie back today and her friend Meagan Bilodeau, who again will just lead a wonderful discussion. Just a quick a few notes about participating today. So this is being recorded. So if you need to leave the session at any point today for your self-care or for your schedule, please feel free to do that. The recording will be available later today on the Survivor Circles page on Survivor Space and also on Zero Abuse Project's YouTube channel. So you can check that out at any time. For those who are attending today, your camera and your audio are disabled, so we are not able to see you or hear you, and that is just for your privacy. But you are able to participate by typing a question or a comment into the chat at the bottom of your screen. When you do that, please note that you can make the audience of your comment or question everyone, so the three of us and folks who are attending, or you can set it to just go to the three of us. But please feel free to type a question or comment at any point. I know that Melanie and Meagan would love to hear your thoughts, so please feel free to do that. And just a quick shout out to our funders, the Office for Victims of Crime, for providing grant funding for all of Survivor Space, including Survivor Circles. So we're grateful for that. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Melanie and Meagan, and welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Becky. So I'll just start off giving a little intro. So I'm probably a familiar face on here at this point, but I am completely honored to be here today alongside Meagan. And I'm really going to let her kind of jump off into the conversation. But a little bit about me, I am a survivor, but I'm also a trained forensic interviewer of children, an advocate through the National Child Advocacy Center. And I am just, this is a kind of conversation that if you do this work that you would never imagine that you'd get to have. And so I'm really, really grateful that Meagan is here to tell you her story, but also our connection, which we will save for throughout the conversation. But it's a really humbling experience for me after being in the field for over 10 years. I have a handful of stories like this, but I've never been able to kind of share it to the world and to inspire other advocates out there, other survivors, other teams of people helping survivors. So we are just very honored to be here together today to share our kind of full circle story with you. And I'm going to kick it off to Meagan to do a little intro about herself, what she's doing now and who she is, and then we'll get into it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Meagan Bilodeau. I'm 22 years old. I graduated from Salve Regina University in Rhode Island last year with degrees in English communications and pre-law. I met Melanie because when I was 13 years old, I underwent sexual assault multiple times between the ages of 3 and 5 years old. I did not disclose until I was 13. I met Melanie when I was 13 and had to go through a very treacherous court process throughout high school, which is where most of my PTSD and all of that stems from. But I was so honored to have Melanie, and just to be here today and have that connection with her still is something that is so influential to me. To this day, I was able to turn my pain into purpose, and in 2021, I created my own organization called Changing the Conversation, one child at a time. We just underwent a name change, but it's officially known as Know Your No Zone Corporation. I am a public speaker. I am an author and an advocate, and I actually just released my own children's book called Zippy the Zebra, Breaking the Silence on the Savannah, about the lifelong impacts of childhood sexual assault.
And that's a jam-packed, you are a force to be reckoned with, Meagan. And it's been a complete humbling honor to watch your journey over the past, how many years has it been? Many years. I think that was like 6 or 7 years ago, or even more than that, when I was kind of walking alongside you in my role at a Child Advocacy Center as a family advocate for kids and families there. And so now that we've kind of done an intro about who we are, what we're doing, I'd love to hear you just tell your story a little bit, your kind of journey, and then I will kind of reflect back on my journey, watching your journey unfold.
Absolutely. I feel like most of my journey comes through the emotions that I felt throughout the court process, but to put a foundation behind it, when I was 13 years old, my mother picked me up from school, and on our way to the store, I had gotten a text from my abuser, who is in my family, a very close family member who actually lived with us. And it was starting to get to the point where it was uncomfortable, and I was like, my radar was going off even at that young age that something was wrong. So I texted my friend and I ended up telling my mother, and she pulled over and she called the Child Advocacy Center that Melanie was working at the time. And from there, my life changed forever. I look back on that day as one of the most influential days of my life. While it was very sad in the moment, I feel like it's something that I was given this story for a purpose. So when I went to the Child Advocacy Center, it was a very, I'm so grateful to them, but it was a very long and treacherous, grueling process going through that court situation at a young age. I eventually won in court and had to testify against the family member in court, which was a very intense and extreme moment. But throughout that entire process, I had Melanie with me, and she has been such an inspiration. I am so, so grateful to her. I would not be where I am today without her.
And it's really just super powerful for me to look back on those years, because I too have a story very similar to yours, Megan, and you know this at this point, where I went through a child advocacy center as well as a child, and I reconnected with the woman who interviewed me, who was kind of like an advocate for me, kind of, her and I's story is very similar to yours and mine. I was able to reconnect with her and share our story in places like this, and at conferences and things like that, about the full circle, the power and reconnecting with someone or staying connected to someone that was so influential on your journey. And I'm completely honored to have been part of yours. And just really, my perspective going through that time, it was it was obviously my job, right, to walk beside you and your family. But more than that, which you did not know at the time because it wasn't appropriate to share with you, but I was, I knew that story more than you thought I did. And I knew what it was like to walk through a trial and go and testify against the person who hurt me. And so I was standing there in solidarity with you. And again, you didn't know that at the time, but, really being a survivor as well, there's a sense of solidarity and just support that is really at another level. And you blew me away with your courage, your tenacity in a very difficult process, a very long process, a process that brought your family through the ringer, really. And because it was a family member, that was just another layer that you had to walk through. And just the way that you stood strong and tall, and the way that you carried yourself throughout that whole process. And I remember you telling me, like, I want to use this. And at that time, we didn't know what that meant, but girl, you have used it. And I have chills right now just thinking back to that time where it was so hard and you weren't sure if it was ever going to end, and how difficult and painful it was to face him, and just the different things that can come up in court and different things like that. But you stood there like an anchor in a storm, and you stood strong, and you carried yourself beautifully then, and even more so now, that you found healing. It's just been really awesome to see kind of what you've done with your life and how you've taken this pain and made it your purpose. So talk about why it's like important to advocate, and why why it's important to have an advocate by survivors' sides when they're walking through something like this.
Absolutely. When I was 13, the reason why I didn't tell a while back, because my abuser gave me quite a few long years of a break where he didn't bring it up again. And I thought it was over, and I thought that our family could just continue on. So I let it go. but by the time that I was in my preteen years and it was brought up to me again and my radar was going off, I knew that I had to tell someone despite the outcome. So I remember being in a bookstore in my hometown with my best friend at the time, and these thoughts were just flying through my head and my radar was continuously going off at this point. And I was like, I need to tell you something. And I finally told her what had been going on to me throughout those years. And she was like, I think you need to tell someone. And I told her my concerns, that I was afraid that my parents were going to get divorced as my abuser was on my dad's side, and I thought my dad would side with him, and all of these things as to why I shouldn't tell somebody. But as time went on, I realized that no matter the outcome, he was going to be doing this regardless, whether it was to me or whether it was to someone else. So that's why I decided that I needed to use my voice as a power and use my objects as arsenals of strength. And I really am so proud of myself for standing up, as I thought my family would just, like Melanie said, be put through the ringer. And through the court process, they were put through the ringer, but we all were anchored together. We all stayed strong. And I'm so grateful that Melanie was just my anchor and my rock throughout this. I could not be more appreciative. And even just to this day, like, she is still my inspiration. I just wrote the dedication in my book about her, and she has just been such a light. And I really want to use my story as a purpose for others out there, that they can use their voice and that their voices are empowering and they are so strong.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a great point that, a lot of times as survivors, we feel this, once we kind of get through what we walked through. I remember having the same feeling of walking out of the courtroom and wanting to do something with this and almost feeling like a obligation to. And I think there's two sides of that unfortunately, their survivors should never feel obligated to do anything with their
Right.
story or with their experience. But I think going through it and kind of walking through the fire really gives us this kind of burst of, whether it be passion or energy or really inspiration, all the things that you've described of like, I don't want this to be for nothing. And for every survivor, that looks different. I often use this quote that I've heard someone say, another survivor advocate that I really admire. And she always says that, like, we are not all called to a platform, but we are called to use our voice. And I think that is like the breadth of, kind of walking through this as a survivor of like, what does that look like for us individually, but also collectively. And so I think you just put that really beautifully of like, you wanted to turn this into something. Back then you didn't know what that was. And now you're in that, you're doing it. And, so what else has that looked like for you? So you went through this court process that I was by your side through, and then talk about what happened after that.
So after I won in court against my family member, the next year it was on my mind constantly. And I remember having a conversation with my mom out at dinner one night, and I told her that what I had told Melanie, that I knew I needed to do something with this because I knew that I was given my story for a purpose. And that is something that I also was like telling my therapist and the people that I was working with at the time throughout that process. And it really was just like an ethereal feeling of, okay, I was given this story, and it might be like weird to say, but like I was blessed with the story to bless others going through this process. That's why I was put on this earth, and I know that. So my goal with it now is to go to law school part-time, study child advocacy law, and eventually become a public prosecutor defending women and children and families who have been impacted by sexual assault and violence against them. But since I was 17, about the time that I won against my family member, I began volunteering at that advocacy center that Melanie worked at the time. And I was so lucky that we got to go to a conference together. We were able to do an event together in my hometown, and we were able to just raise awareness about it in general. And since then, I have also gotten involved in pageantry. And as a local Miss America title holder in the past, and now Miss Maine Volunteer America, I'm going to nationals in June, and my entire platform is about advocating for children and families through my nonprofit organization, changing the conversation one child at a time. And as a part of that, I have a podcast and I have an Instagram live series that I'm currently working on where I bring on other title holders from all different platforms and across the entire nation to come on and talk about their own experiences and kind of give them that safe space that I was given.
Yeah. And that's such a beautiful kind of tapestry of using your pain for purpose. And again, like that's very unique to you. And mine looked very different. Mine looked like, paving this path, working in the field full time, sharing my story across the country. And there's essences of that in your experience, but I love it's a beautiful thing when it's different. And it's a different way to kind of get your message out there, your message of hope, your message of healing. And I think it's just really a beautiful way to kind of spread it across the country. And I think that's a really cool kind of niche that you have to be able to reach the Miss America program with this platform and beyond it. And I think it has such a huge reach. And I think that's really powerful for us advocates in the field to see these things come up in those circles, to know, and then survivors know that they're not alone, no matter what they're interested in or what they're involved in. And so you mentioned something about, your therapist and talking through this with that person as well. Talk a little bit about the importance of seeking professional help, whatever you're comfortable with sharing, going through those difficult times, breaking away from that, the stigma for asking for help is wrong. Talk a little bit about that on your journey.
It's so important for people going through this to have professional help, whatever that may look like to them. And not only that, but to have the right fit with professional help. I didn't find my right fit until long after my experience, actually. I went through a few different therapists, and it was because of that, it was kind of a grueling process because I didn't connect with them and I didn't feel like I could share my full story and share myself without not so much being judged, but there were just other aspects that went into it. So it's so important for people to have a safe space. I was so lucky that even years later, I was able to find my safe space um, long after my journey, because no matter what, there are going to be long-term impacts of sexual assault and violence. And these will be lifelong. This can bleed into your relationships. It can bleed into your family. There's so many just different aspects of life that it can hit on without you realizing it, and it will affect you. So no matter how long it's been, it's so important to seek help in a proper way.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. I think it can look different in every season of your healing journey. For me, early on, it was counseling, therapy, EMDR. For me now, it's more of kind of a natural approach where it's like getting by the ocean, getting my feet in the sand, being out in the sunshine. I'm kind of getting back to writing a little bit. I used that early on in the form of poetry, but now I'm kind of considering writing a book and kind of channeling this energy into that and really walking through many different aspects of healing. And it can look different regarding wherever you are on your journey. So, therapy right now is not like at the priority for me, and that's okay, because I have these other outlets and these other things. But at any time, I totally feel okay going back to therapy, and I have through the years. I've had breaks and then I've gone back. And so I think that's the beauty in sharing two different experiences with healing, yours and mine, because something that works for you may not work for me, or something that works for you now may work for me later down the road. And so that's the beauty of sharing our stories and standing side by side, because we can maybe learn things that we didn't think about that may be helpful to us, but also that it's okay to pave our own way, which I think is a beautiful thing.
Something that you always
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, something that you always touch on that I love is that your healing journey does not have to be linear. And that's something that I've incorporated even now into my everyday life. So I love that you talk about that in your own.
Yeah, and it is like, it's something I've heard throughout the years, and I've kind of added something to it. It's, healing is not linear, but it's worth it. Because I think it's hard to get stuck on like, oh gosh, it's like not the same, like especially as a survivor, not knowing what's which end is up, and that can be really hard. And so I always like to end that with it's worth it, because no matter what it looks like in the end, the healing journey is worth it, because it can and will turn into something beautiful, if you really seek it. And, I think that both of us sitting here today is a testament to that of, I'm sure back then, and I'm not going to speak for you, but I know during my, process through the court, I couldn't see that light at the end of the tunnel. And, it just seemed like so long. My trial lasted for like 2 years. It was postponed 5 times. Like it didn't end great. Like I didn't, in my, experience, I didn't essentially win, even though I got a conviction. It was a very, very small conviction compared to what I thought should have happened or could have happened with what he did to my friend and I. But, I had other experiences in my life where I didn't go forward in the court process. And honestly, I look back now and like, I didn't necessarily need that huge win to heal. I think I take pieces from that court process, where I was able to find my voice going through the Child Advocacy Center. And so winning can look different, for every survivor. And I think, it was really powerful, just to see the bravery and accomplishment, that you were able to take that as a win, for even after all you had been through the court process, that you were able to take that as a win and carry that with you to then empower your voice, down the road. And it was just really an honor to bear witness to that, both as a survivor who maybe didn't get that win, but also as an advocate who had the honor of watching you grow from that 13-year-old that came into my office, that really wouldn't look me in the eye. And now you're here, you're radiant, you're, looking me right in the eyes. And it's just such a beautiful transformation when you find healing. And you are just such a beautiful example of that. So let's talk about, let's see, where should we go? We could go a lot of different places. Well, let's see if there's any, let's leave a little margin here. If there's any questions or anything anybody wants to know. I know we have some people on live right now. If there's anything anybody wants to know about Meagan and I's journey, both individually or collectively, feel free to drop it in the chat while we're continuing on, just so that we can touch on some things, because this is a very unique conversation and not a lot of people get to hear it. Really a survivor and an advocate who were, working together through, your experience. So we'd love to have some interaction here, just so that we can, really capture what's on people's minds about this conversation. But talk about a little bit about your, like, once you started to volunteer or give back kind of in the field, what was that like for you?
It was definitely a different process. I mean, you're looking at it from a whole different side. You're going from the side of a victim to the side of a survivor turned advocate. And I think that's really empowering. It's really empowering to know that I had the ability to turn my pain into purpose. And I remember one of the first events that we had done, we went to a conference in Massachusetts. And the stories that the survivors were telling really stand out to me to this day. I remember how empowering it was for them to just be on that stage. And I was like, wow, I can do that someday in my own life. And right after that is when I found pageantry, and I was able to use my voice on stage and talk about my social impact initiative to hundreds of people in the audience. And that's something that I would never have imagined myself doing. I was such a shy, quiet person growing up. And now I'm out on stage and like I have this confidence that's like ethereal. And I'm so grateful like for my story that I've been able to have that.
So do you feel like being around like other professionals, in the field, during that conference was like what catapulted you into having that confidence of like feeling like you were kind of, for me, it was like when I first started going into like professional conferences or things like that, it was like, okay, like this is the actual example of turning my pain to purpose. Like I'm here as a professional now. And it boosted my confidence a ton as a survivor, but also like to starting my career as an advocate. It really kind of bolstered me and prepared me, to be confident and have a seat at the table. And sometimes, like most of the time early on, I didn't share my story in advocate spaces. Like when I was, professional capacity. And again, like you didn't know my story till way, way later
Mhm.
after you reached back out to me when you were in like going into college, and we could talk a little bit more about what happened there and what that was like for you. But it's just really cool to kind of have that other identity as like a professional and someone who is kind of trusted with this conference, being in this space, and whose voice actually has value in these spaces, even outside of survivorship. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I feel like seeing the professionals definitely guided me to where I am today. Something that I really struggled with in telling my story with at first was that I was kind of shamed by members of my family for what happened. They didn't necessarily say that I had done wrong, but they were like, don't tell your story to other people because other people might look at you differently. And to this day, like those words have stuck with me, but they've kind of been used as like a fuel to my fire. Like I was given the story for a reason, and watching those professional speakers talk about their own experiences just makes me want to talk about mine more. And someone kind of like belittling my story makes me just want to talk about it more. Like there's no reason for me to hide what happened to me. And I feel like that's very empowering to see others who may be belittled in their own aspect today and be like, wow, she went through the same thing that I'm going through currently. And this just gives me all the more reason to use my story as fuel to my fire.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It looks like we do have a question in the chat. It's awesome to hear your connection with each other and in this movement. What can other professionals, child advocacy, therapy, legal, do to help create the safety and connection that you both seem to embody? So I'd love you to start off. What was it like? What was it on this journey for you and I? Like, what stuck out to you? What was I able to do for you that you kind of wanted to keep the connection going, and to get us to where we are today? Because sometimes, I mean, most times, even as advocates, like I'll never hear from like the hundreds and hundreds of cases and kids and families that I worked with, um, throughout my 10 years in the field so far. But there are some that come back, and some that either come back to thank me or tell me where their journey has gone since then, or in pursuit of a career they come back to ask me like tips to get into the field and different internships and things like that. So what was it for you that to help professionals kind of create this experience for those that they're working with?
I think the thing was you gave me that year, you gave me that safe space, you gave me that shoulder to lean on. That's why I never stopped the connection. I mean, I feel like it was barely even a year later when I had reached back out to you wanting to volunteer at the Child Advocacy Center, and you went to my graduation party. And since then, we stayed in contact. I remember it was either my first or second year of college. I came back home to do a coat drive with you for the Advocacy Center, and just like little things to keep us in each other's thoughts. Like I know I reached out to you about like in college, my first 2 years were spent in the criminal justice field before I changed over to English communications and pre-law. And I remember I had reached out to you like for an internship and like doing an event together. And you were just someone that was always there for me in ways that I wasn't getting it sometimes, like in my own experience throughout that process. And that's where I'm so thankful to you. Like I really feel blessed to know you and blessed that we were given this story together.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so many things, I can look back on in my own experience, just being that first and very important person on my journey. That's what I would say initially, with my forensic interviewer, my advocates that were alongside me. But again, there's that difficult, like from a professional standpoint, like how do you re-enter someone's story, or how do you stay in contact? Is it appropriate, in a working relationship? And I think, there was a resolution to your case. There was
Mhm.
things, that you had done, you pursued your healing journey, you got professional help. There were some things that you did, that made the connection possible to continue. And that's brave in itself, that it's really hard as a survivor to kind of seek out healing in a real way, because it's very, very difficult, and it sometimes can be a long journey to healing. And so with a lot of peaks and valleys. And so for me it was really having that first and very important person on my journey, but also that consistency, that kind of showing up for me. For you, it was me coming to your graduation party, staying in contact about things outside of your survivorship, professional goals,
Mhm.
schooling, checking in on how college is going, just in a simple way. And, for me, it was very similar. My team just wanted to hear the end result, like how was I doing 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. For me, I actually invited my team, the detective that arrested my perpetrator, the forensic interviewer who interviewed me, and the court advocate were all at my college graduation party as well. My mom surprised me with them, and I think the thing with that is they said yes, and they found ways to appropriately do that professionally.
Mhm.
I think as providers, it often is told to us that we can't stay connected to anyone we've worked with. And again, there is good reason for that. There has to be a protection between kind of the survivor advocate relationship or therapist
Mhm.
client relationship. But I think I don't want to call them loopholes, but there are ways to do it appropriately, and to assess it appropriately. And I think that's kind of what I did. I knew that, obviously I was not going to tell you my story early on or connect with you on that level because it wasn't appropriate or okay. And so
Mhm.
you didn't know that until much later, after you were already graduated high school and going into college and pursuing this as a career,
Mhm.
when we talked. And I think I told you, but it's really just important to have boundaries, but also to think of creative ways to if a kid or a client or a teenager or an adult reaches back out to you. I think there are ways to kind of celebrate their wins, like, even if it's just a simple email back,
Mhm.
that may be where it ends, but that will mean so much to the survivor or the client. I know that I held on to messages from my advocate and the woman who interviewed me as a child and the detective. And then, in bigger ways, if you're able to support in their future endeavors, going to those graduation parties. Um, and again, if it's not appropriate, you don't do it and you find a way to gently deliver that. But if there is a way to support those wins, for me, the detective got me a scholarship for college and brought me over to the advocate's house with their families, and they like celebrated me and they had a cake for me and they surprised me with this scholarship to go to college to pursue this career,
Mhm.
turning my pain to purpose. The detective that interviewed me, the detective that was on my case, came to my wedding in 2022. And again, this is 20 years after my experience, right? And he knows that I travel and speak across the country. So I asked him to record a video of himself reflecting on our experience, our full circle story. And now I can use that in the trainings that I'm doing. And he's not there for those. He doesn't travel with me, but he was able to provide that video for me. So I think, just small and big ways, little things are the big things. I felt like on my journey, but small and big ways to support those that we're working with can go a really long way. So did you have anything else to add on that, Megan?
I 100% agree with everything that you just said. Little things go such a long way. Like you talked about, I kept your little notes from my graduation party and I still have them today. I still look at them. They mean so much to me. And just like you reposting what I do now and like the things that I hear from people about doing this with a purpose are so meaningful. But again, like finding a way to do that in a way that doesn't overstep boundaries and doesn't overstep that professional relationship is very important.
And then there was another comment and questions like, yes, so much professional training says to hold these sometimes artificial boundaries so strictly that it can be very off-putting or make people feel pushed away. And kind of on the other side, the question is, are there lessons you've learned along the way with this process? Like maybe times when you or others didn't have a good outcomes like the ones that you're describing here. I think it's great to kind of step on the other side now. And I can start on that. The court advocate and I have lost contact, and it's a hard thing for me to talk about, but I think it answers this question.
Right.
Um, there were some like different things that were going on and political things that got in the way of our relationship, and it just kind of had to end. It ended pretty abruptly. And so this was a really hard experience for me to walk through, because I felt some kind of betrayal and some, some stuff that, she had walked with me for so many years, and, it was really devastating. But I think in my life now, like, I have the people that are meant to be here, right? We can look at it like, you know, kind of how we talked about the healing journey. Some things that worked for you back then may not work for you now. And that relationship just had to be let go. But in the process, I've had more margin for other relationships to be stronger. So maybe, I don't know for sure, but, maybe I was able to really connect a little bit deeper with that detective and his wife, where they were able to come alongside me and support me. And, and then the forensic interviewer, her and her family, maybe if I was still connected to everybody, there would be just a lot of people to connect with, and so I think there is kind of a, it's hard, people grow apart we know that in general relationships, that people grow apart, or I've heard, my friend who went through it the same day as me, she didn't stay in touch with anybody after the case ended, and that was healthy for her. Like, she just cut it off. She didn't want to be in contact with anybody. I pursued the connection with everybody after the fact, and, they were able to celebrate my wins, but she didn't have any of that long term, which I think is pro and con. It was probably good for her at the time just because of what she was going through, but the con is not having not having that support long term, which led to her really struggling down the road. But I love this. Someone put in the chat, remember, some are with us for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And I think that's a beautiful way to capture this idea and this, outcome that may not have been great. I think that is healing, that our relationship mattered, and it held a beautiful story back then, and I can still tell that story for that time and place, but it did not turn out the way yours and mine did, and that's okay. And that's very much like the healing journey, right? It's not linear. It's not kind of one size fits all. It's really, peaks and valleys, and when trauma is involved and when there's connection, professional connection, and it can get really complicated, and people are people, and so we just have to kind of do our best to love each other, support each other, stand in solidarity with each other, but also know that things can change, and that's okay. And we can kind of hold those people near and dear to our hearts and let them go. And so I think, and you have to do that as an advocate, and I'm sure you've learned this kind of early on, like, not every kid or family or teenager or adult that you work with is going to come back and thank you, or is going to come back and tell you about their life down the road. Many you'll never know what happens to them. And I think that's kind of the hard other side of this, is that this story is very unique and where it's come full circle, but it doesn't always happen like that.
Absolutely. To kind of
what is your perspective on that?
Yes, to kind of back that up a little, I mean, I had about 4 or 5 people working on my case, and I remember directly after my case was kind of like this abrupt end of contact, but I was at the same time ready for that. I think that was the start of my healing process, was knowing that this was now over and it's my story to choose what I want to do with it. So I was having a conversation with my mom directly after the case, and I remember her saying that I need to stay in contact with you. And I felt that way. And I knew that I felt that way throughout the court process, because you were just such a light. I remember going back into the room and you being there, and my dad crying after my family member was taken away in handcuffs. And it was just this moment that's ingrained in my brain, but I remember you being there throughout it. And I can't say the same for any of the other people that were there, but I feel like that was them keeping their professional relationship and not overstepping those boundaries. But I'm so thankful that we were able to find a loophole with that and find a way to connect and stay connected, because you are such a big part of my healing journey.
Yeah, it's a complete honor, Megan. And I keep saying that, but it's, I had this story the other way around, and I never would have imagined that, I was just doing this out of my own pain for purpose, and, really wanting to support survivors anywhere, anytime, in any way that I could, because I knew what it was like to have that support, and I wanted that so badly for others. So that's why I pursued my career. But to hear you say that is really like really, really powerful to me. And I'll carry that with me for the rest of my life and the rest of my career. It's, kids and teenagers and adults like you that help keep us going. And I'm sure you'll learn that as you go, that, there are just some cases that hit you in a way, or you stay connected to in a way. And it's fuel to your fire to continue on this really hard but rewarding work. Another great question in the chat, should these types of outside of the box relationships be primarily survivor initiated and led, or are there types or times or ways for the professionals to initiate this stuff?
I feel like they should be survivor initiated, at least in my experience. Like, after the court process was over and after my last testimony and speaking in court, I was like, this is my healing journey now, and I can run with it in any direction that I want to. And I wanted to connect with you. That's a connection that I knew I wanted to keep in my life for a really long time. And that was one of the first things that I did after the court process, after taking a few months to heal and like think about what had happened and process it. And I remember we were kind of close to our detective at the time too, but that's a connection that faltered as time went on. And I really like what Sue said. Remember, some are with us for a reason, a season or a lifetime. And while some of the advocates for me were only there for a season, I'm just really appreciative that I was able to take it in my own way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great point. I think, I think it's important in a lot of ways for survivors that they have kind of the ball in their court on that reconnection or the choice to continue on that relationship, because sometimes it can carry a lot of weight. I could have maybe I can put myself in the shoes of a survivor that is like, this is over and I'm done with it. Like, I want to move on with my life. When I see that person's name, even though they were a great support to me, all I think about is this grueling process, and I think that's an okay response. I think, if I was in that space, I maybe wouldn't have wanted an advocate to reach out to me after the fact. Or, the only kind of loophole I could think of where an advocate could reach out first is if like a survivor, for example, some of the work that you're doing now, right? It's out there, you are putting it out there yourself, whether it comes up on a LinkedIn or a Facebook page or an organization that has mutual connections, you happen to stumble upon it that way as the advocate that was on the case with that survivor. I don't think it would be a bad thing to, like, if you felt compelled to reach out and say, hey, I love to see you out there doing this work or doing what you're doing. I just, commend your courage back then when we worked together. And again, even voicing like, the ball's in your court on this. This is the only message I'll send you. Feel free to reach out and leave. So I think that could be maybe one of the only ways, like, if that survivor is kind of out in the open, it is kind of taught to us as advocates or even clinicians at times, like, if you're out in public and you see someone that you've worked with, you let them kind of initiate the conversation, which I think is kind of along the same vein of what we're talking about. But I think if that person initiates a conversation, it's kind of free to do what you wish with it. Again, keeping those boundaries if there needs to be. But also, if the survivor is out there doing great work or, really doing amazing things with their lives and you happen to stumble upon it, I don't think it's harmful, with the caveat of like being honest with the survivor. Like, if you don't want me to contact you again, that's fine. Or you don't want me to follow your page or be involved, that's totally fine. So giving the survivor kind of a way out if it's too much for them. But also opening the conversation, if that may be really powerful for the survivor to hear from someone that worked with them back then, to see what they're doing now and to support them in their wins. So let's see, I think there's another. Okay. we do have kind of a question directed at me from actually a good friend of mine, Sue. I'm so glad she's here to bear witness to this. So God has used bad for his good. I'm amazed at y'all's courage and boldness and willingness to share to help to meet the needs of other survivors and their families. So Meagan, you've shared a bit of your future plans for advocacy. What about me? So I've been kind of in this field in various roles for, as Meagan, as you know, for over a decade now. And it looks a little different for me right now, which is kind of exciting. So I spent, a couple years in domestic violence advocacy, walking survivors through the court process, in addition to working on a hotline, an overnight imminent danger shelter. Then I moved here, worked at a child advocacy center for 6 years, first as a family advocate, and then got trained as a forensic interviewer in 2021. So I still hold that training in all those years as an advocate, kind of working in the trenches, in the day-to-day, in the courtrooms, both in New Hampshire and Massachusetts, in addition to walking survivors through any and all processes that they have to go through as a result of going through the Child Advocacy Center. Since I got married in 2022, had my daughter in 2023, and so advocacy looks a bit different to me now, which is kind of a cool thing to reflect back on. Right now, I'm working with a couple different organizations, Zero Abuse Project and Survivor Space being one of them, doing things like this, creating survivor-led content for the website and the app, and exciting things to come. And connecting with other survivors through this platform. In addition to that, I've been hired as a contractor facilitator for the organization I Have the Right To, which is an amazing organization going into schools training. I was just in DC last week training a year 9 school in DC, and hoping to continue on with that organization, using my story to educate middle schools and high schools. And in addition, and maybe some teacher training as well, which is exciting to be able to train professionals in the education field. In addition to that, just really connecting with other organizations. I'm on the board of directors for SHIELD Task Force out of West Virginia, in addition to a local organization here on Cape Cod called Treasured Life Initiative, which is to support survivors of sex trafficking, and volunteering at different organizations within the field. So kind of out of the box advocacy, and also sharing my story across the country. I actually leave very early on a plane tomorrow morning to go talk to a multidisciplinary team in Ohio through the Canopy Child Advocacy Center, and be a speaker at their gala event on Thursday night. So it looks a little bit different. I'm not kind of in the trenches every day like I was when I met Meagan, but I'm still kind of doing this advocacy thing, and it's incredible women like Meagan that inspire me to keep going, to keep whatever it looks like, to keep sharing my story, to keep walking alongside survivors in any way that I can. And it's really just an honor to be able to do that. So, yeah. So Meagan, I'd love to hear what your life is like now. That's a great segue. What your life is like now, working in the field yourself now, what that looks like in addition to kind of life after trauma, relationships after trauma. How are you like a survivor more than your story, because you just radiate that. And I think it's really powerful for people to hear. And talk a little bit about your book one more time, because I think it would be really cool for people to get their hands on that. I know Becky has a link to that you can drop in the chat or put in the recording notes. But yeah, just talk about kind of from your professional life and personal life, whatever you're comfortable with, exciting things that are happening for you now and for your future.
Yes. So last May, like I said, I graduated from Salve Regina University in Rhode Island with degrees in English communications and pre-law. After that, I kind of took an interesting different path as someone that wants to go to law school. I met my fiance when I was in college, and we're getting married not this October, but next October in Italy. I'm so excited. And he's actually the yacht captain of the boat that I work on. So of course we got hired as a couple, and I'm so lucky to work for owners that I've been able to share my story with, and they've been able to like act as a space for me to like, and an encouragement for me to follow down my path. So I know they want to help support me through law school or help support me through the path that I decide to take, whether that be child advocacy law, family law. And I'm so lucky that when I do that, I'll be able to do that part-time and continue working on the boat. And they've given me the ability to do that, which I'm so excited for. So I plan on taking my LSAT course in the fall and either going to school starting in the spring or the following fall. I really want to go to Nova Southeastern or FIU, which are both in Florida. I moved to Miami in October for my job, and it's been so exciting in this area. I actually competed in a competition last month, Miss South Florida, and I got to talk about my platform again there, my social impact initiative, my community service initiative, and it was to a live audience of about 100 people. And it's just these little like growth spots, these little competitions that are allowing me to use my voice in a very powerful way, something that I would have never even imagined myself doing before. Like I said, I was the most shy, quiet person growing up. Like I was afraid to look someone in the eye, like Melanie had said to me. And I just really feel like God has given me this story for a reason. While I don't work with my therapist anymore, I feel like my resilience and my strength really comes from my faith in God. And attributing that to my story, I have a copy of it right here so you can kind of see what it looks like. It has the author like line on the front. So yours will not look like that, but you get the idea. It's so exciting. I published it 2 weeks ago now, and it's about growing from your experiences and how to overcome what you went through. So it gently addresses the topic of childhood sexual assault without going too far into it. And something that I want to do as a title holder, actually, as Miss Main volunteer, is to go into schools, read my book, give these child-friendly resources to children, especially elementary age children, because that's the age that it happened to me. And had I known at that age what was going on, I probably would have told someone sooner. So that's my goal, because every 9 minutes in the state of Florida, it's happening, and I want to be that voice for change.
I have chills throughout this whole conversation. And Megan's going to inspire me now to get on it and write my book. It's been marinating for probably over a decade. So I'm going to use Megan as my inspiration to write my book. And I'll probably reach out to you about that. So, but yeah, so it's just, I think the beautiful thing is that exactly that like Megan leaned on me for a time in her life, and now I can gain inspiration from her in something that I've wanted to do for a long time. And that's a beautiful power of connection. I think, you never know whose life you're going to impact when you either share your story or bear witness to someone else's. And I think Megan and I have talked about this, so we're going to put it out there. We would love to like speak somewhere together and share this story. And so, if you're out there and you think this would be a powerful thing to share, with your community, with your advocacy center or anywhere else, we would be honored to be in that space together to share this in a more tangible in-person way. So Becky has our contact information if anybody is interested in that. We are here and we're both willing even to do this again on another platform. So just wanted to pitch that really quick. And Sue had maybe one final question. What would y'all like from us? Ooh, that could be exciting. I mean, for me, I would love for people to get Megan's book in their hands and get it into the hands of kids, because I think it is a very age appropriate way to let kids know that they have a voice and they have courage, and no matter what's been done to them, that they can they can use their voice. And I think that's so important for kids to know early on. And I think, the beautiful thing, Megan and I both share faith on our journeys. And I think that's one of the biggest things, so being able to use this to give hope to people, and to share what you've heard here today with people. And if you know someone that's going through the aftermath of sexual abuse or sexual assault, really letting them know that there is hope at the end of the long and seemingly dark tunnel, and that this recording will be available. So getting this into the hands of people who may be struggling or who may be working with people who are struggling, in addition to, you know, getting the awareness out there about Survivor Space, because Survivor Space is an incredible dynamic resource for survivors and those who work with survivors. There's lots of content coming out all the time. We have some things for caregivers coming out. We have some things for parents coming out. We have some things for, you know, and it's all survivor led content. And so Survivor Informed, you know, there's a group of us working on the content, and it's an incredible community for survivors and those who love them to not feel alone. And so I think, you know, those are my two things: is tell people about Meagan's book and buy it on Amazon and get it into the hands of kids that you know and love, but also you know, supporting Survivor Space initiative, getting awareness out there about the website, about the Instagram, about, you know, the LinkedIn, or any way that you can get Survivor Space into the hands of professionals and survivors. I would just pitch that in a big way. What about you, Meagan?
Just sharing our story and using it for hope for others. If there's any way for you to repost it or give it to your family, your friends, your loved ones that you think may be going through something, even if they haven't expressed that to you, just getting the word out there and having these conversations. Something that I always talk about as a part of my platform is destigmatizing the stigma, because there's such a stigma around having these talks with other people, and that's why the statistics are unfortunately so high. So just normalizing these conversations in your everyday life and maybe using our story as hope for your own path.
Yeah, and it's really, you know, 1 in 10 survivors report, and that's not a big number. And so being able to be that safe place for survivors to land, even if you didn't experience it yourself, just believing and supporting survivors that you may come into contact with, and sharing a story of hope like this, that, you know, pain can be turned into purpose, especially if someone is in the crux of the hard part. Just, you know, I think resources like this were invaluable to me, to hear other stories that were kind of in the light. You know, I know for me, I had a bunch of those. I actually am doing a circle with one coming up, Nicole Braddock Bromley, who's been a great inspiration to me on the healing journey. So yeah, just connecting people back to Survivor Space, these opportunities to hear, and there's incredible survivor circles going on this week and to come, with incredible survivors that I have the honor of working with here through Survivor Space. So just get the word out there and pass these messages along. And I think we'll wrap it up there, unless there's any other burning questions from the audience. We really appreciate you all being here today. We appreciate those who will watch it after the recording and from the recording, and we just are deeply grateful for our journey, and hope to continue to be that ripple effect for others.
Thank you both so much. I don't want this hour to end. It's just so touching, so heartwarming for me, from both sides of the spectrum, as a survivor and as an advocate. Like, just hearing this, you know, conversation is just so heartwarming. I really, really appreciate both of you so much. Thank you to everyone who's joined us today. I know it was empowering and inspiring to you all as well. So thank you so much for joining us. And as Melanie said, please keep an eye on the Survivor Circle schedule. We have a couple more great ones coming up this week, and certainly more to come after this week. So thank you all so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.